We're now
Good
live,
afternoon.
David.
Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the West Craven Area Committee. This is a working meeting of a Pendle Council committee, and I'll ask people to introduce themselves in a moment. My name is David Whipp. I chair the meeting. I am a councillor in Bonalswick. The meeting considers various issues that affect West Craven. We haven't got a big agenda today because we're just getting used to having virtual rather than physical meetings. We've got 2 planning applications that we're going to be considering, and then there are a number of other issues that affect the area as well. As I mentioned, it is a meeting of Pendle Council, and we are subject to various rules, one of which affects speaking. I've got one member of the public, or an agent I assume, to speak on the planning application, and he's limited to 5 minutes. In terms of voting, the rules on voting are that members of the committee who are elected Pendle councillors can vote, and they'll be doing that in due course. We do have co-opted members, of which Christine from Salterworth Parish Council has joined us this afternoon. And unfortunately, although Christine can propose and second things and contribute to the meeting in other ways, co-opted members such as Christine are unable to vote. I think with that, I'll just call for apologies from Joanne.
Peter Hampson and Gary Wilson.
Thank you very much. Can I give apologies from Emma West, Bonalswick Town Council's representative, who's working. If I can go around now and ask people to introduce themselves, and I'll ask people in the order that they are on my screen, which may or not make sense to people. So, Ken, Councillor Hartley. You're muted, Mike. You're muted, Ken.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Ken Hartley. I'm a Pendleborough councillor for Craven Ward, Bonalswick.
Thank you. David Walker.
Good afternoon, David Walker, Pendleborough Council's Area Coordinator for West Craven Committee.
Thank you. Mike Goulthorpe.
Good afternoon, Pendleborough Councillor for Earby Ward.
Thank you. Jane Mills. You're muted.
Yeah, I know, got you. Good afternoon, Jane Mills, Pendleborough Councillor for Cotswold in Bonalswick.
Joanne Eccles.
Committee Administrator at Pendle Council, and I forgot to give Councillor Carroll's apologies as well today.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Whipp.
Councillor Tom Whipp. I'm the member for Cotswold, Bonalswick.
Thank you. Marjorie Adams.
Marjorie Adams, Pendleborough Councillor for Cotswold, Bonalswick.
Thank you. Christine Pollard.
Christine Pollard, Salterworth Parish Council.
Now then, Neil.
Hi, Neil Watson. I'm the planning officer for this meeting.
Thank you. Now then, I've got a Colin as a guest. Who's Colin?
That's me, Colin Carr.
Ah, Colin. Right. Yeah, sorry, Colin.
That's all right.
Yeah, you're just down as Colin, and I was thinking, who is it? Who is it? Now you've all moved on my screen now, which doesn't make it easy. Jennifer. Jennifer? I think you might be muted, Jennifer.
I've unmuted. Good afternoon, everybody. Jennifer Purcell, Craven Ward for Bonalswick.
Thank you. Yeah, loud and clear. And I think that takes us to the end of the list. Have I missed anybody? If nothing else, this introductions does make sure that we're all functioning one way or another, so we can contribute to the meeting. Right. We do have the plan application with a speaker, so I'm going to take that item first, and then Mike can go about his business for the rest of the afternoon. Is that okay with the committee? We're all in agreement with that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are going to take the application for the erection of 129 dwellings, etc., etc., at the former Barnsley Shed site in Barnoldswick. We've got Mike O'Brien to speak from the developers Seddons, and I'm going to bring Mike in a moment. Now, the area committee isn't making a decision on the planning application as such, because with the number of houses involved, this is an application that will be determined by the Policy and Resources Committee. However, we can comment in the way that other bodies can comment about the application. So Mike, if you're ready to make your contribution, I'll bring you in now.
David, sorry, can I just interrupt? Do you think we should do the declarations of interest just before we start the business?
Okay, sorry,
yeah.
Mike. Yeah, okay, right. Formally then, can I ask if anybody's got any declarations of interest?
No. None from me.
No, right.
No.
We'll note that,
Thanks.
and then we'll go back to the plan application. Sorry about that. Mike.
It's okay. Good afternoon. Okay, so the application site comprises the site of the former Barnsley Mill and is located to the east of the settlement of Barnoldswick. Longing Lane is located to the north, and the Leeds-Liverpool Canal forms the west-southwest boundary of the site. Barnoldswick is a key service centre with a full range of facilities. The site is within walking distance of the centre, as well as several bus stops which provide regular services to other towns. The outline planning permission was granted in January 2017 for a residential development of up to 148 dwellings, and access was also agreed to reuse those historic access points that were used for the former mill. The officer's report at the outline stage confirmed that the scheme provided an accessible and sustainable location and would contribute towards the delivery of the council's 5-year housing land supply. So the principle of the development is therefore acceptable, and the current scheme now proposes a reduction to 129 new dwellings. So moving on to the scheme, the submitted layout has sought to build upon the concepts agreed at outline stage, and it creates a layout which accommodates high quality, affordable and sustainable homes, and it allows for substantial areas of both public and private open space within an accessible network, and it maximises residential amenity. So the proposed development will comprise of a range of house types and materials that are sympathetic to the context and surroundings of the site. The proposed development since the scheme was actually submitted, the housing along the canal has actually been amended to address the towpath and canal visually. The heights have been amended so that they visually they've reached like an optimum height, and this has allowed for the addition of several connection points as requested by LCC and the Canal as Rivers Trust, as well as having the best sort of appearance possible. The existing trees and the stone wall along that boundary are particularly prominent, and they will be retained where possible so as to maintain the character and the setting of the area along the canal and particularly soften that appearance of the development. And the existing palisade fencing, which is along part of that boundary, will be replaced with landscaping, which will sort of result in a great appearance from the canal. All the properties will be provided with the required number of parking spaces, which is confirmed in the LCC comments, and the application proposes to provide a policy compliant level of affordable housing, which is 6 in this location. The design and materials of those units will ensure that they're indistinguishable from the market houses. So moving on to technical matters, at the outline stage, it was concluded that with a suitable layout and dwelling design, ventilation, that an acceptable noise level could be provided for occupants of the proposed housing, just to remove any potential impact on the Silent Night Factory going forward. And a noise report is currently being finalised by our consultants, and it shows that acceptable noise levels can be provided in all internal areas of all the dwellings, as well as the back gardens, without the need for noise barriers along the canal. And I think the parish council response seems to suggest that those are required when they're not. The submitted tree survey confirms that where possible, existing trees are proposed to be retained, and particular focus on the edges of the site, as well as the field boundary that runs down the centre of the site, and any tree losses that are required to provide access will be mitigated for and satisfactorily replaced. The matter of flood risk was also considered in principle at the outline stage, and as confirmed in the report, the lead local flood authority is satisfied that any risk of flooding, both on and off the site, would not be unacceptable. And this is the subject of requirements of relevant conditions, and they will be agreed prior to the commencement of any development. So all issues will be sorted on that front. With regards to ecology, the submitted report confirms that the existing grassland habitats to be lost are of limited value, and the proposed development has the potential to provide significant higher value habitats for wildlife than are currently present. And the hedgerow down the centre of the site will be improved significantly to ensure that that's the case. So that principal area of public open space has actually been designed to link the Little Cut Nature Reserve with the canal and the nature reserve on the opposite side of the canal. So it creates and enhances a new corridor in that location. So the benefits, there are numerous socioeconomic and environmental benefits arising from the development. We've got high quality homes which will meet lifetime home requirements. We've got improvements to connectivity and footpaths and cycle routes. And the scheme will actually remediate an area of contaminated land and provide new public open spaces to the benefit of local wildlife, and as well as new and existing residents. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mike. Could I ask committee members if there are any questions? Jane, you've got a question?
Yes, regarding the noise levels and mitigation for those from the factory, would the scheme sort out the excess noise levels in, say, like the bedrooms with the windows open, something like that? He mentioned all the other things about being outside in the garden, but you know, would you still get the excess noise levels in the bedrooms, etc.?
Okay, so the standard which needs to be achieved is basically 55 decibels in rear gardens and 45 within internal rooms such as bedrooms. And so with the glazing will be thickened so as to ensure that those internal areas can be, those standards can be met. And where required, and particularly the properties that will be located on the canal, trickle ventilation will be incorporated into the dwellings so that rooms will be ventilated as required. And the principle of that as a solution was referenced in the Outline Planning Commission Committee report. So that as a solution, the principle of that of those components has already been accepted.
Okay, Jane. Yeah. Are there any further questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Hartley has a question.
Right. I've got Ken who's put his hand up, and then I'll bring Christine in. Ken.
Sorry about that, peoples. I was a bit delayed. Question really for the developer. What proportion of the estate roads are made up to full adoptable standard?
So I'm just going to try and just pull up the layout and the LCC comment just well.
Just whilst you're looking for that,
sure.
Mike, Ken's asking a question about the extent of the estate roads made up to adoptable standard. Could I ask about whether they would actually be submitted for adoption by the County Council, the Highway Authority?
That would have been my supplementary on that one.
Sorry, Ken.
That's all right. Thank you, David. No, thank you. Yeah.
It is the intention that the vast majority of the scheme will be adopted, and that is how it has been designed. Just trying to lay up, just pulling up the layout.
As a way of explanation, developer, the reason that I'm particularly interested in this is whether it's intended to market these houses leasehold or freehold, and therefore who is going to be responsible for the upkeep of a very extensive estate road network.
Oh no, definitely freehold, and the vast majority of the scheme, you can see where the areas will be adopted because it's the full width with pavements either side, which is the vast majority of the scheme, and then where the pavements stop, those will then be private drives, which will be maintained separately.
Mike.
Okay, thank you. I understand that.
Yeah, Mike, are you able to share your desktop? Are you familiar with Teams?
Yep.
If you click on share your desktop, you should be able to show us the relevant plan that you're looking at.
Yeah. How is that? Is that shared?
That's shared. Okay. So looking at that, I mean, you can run your cursor over it, and
I can. You can see the main access point here, and then you've got footpaths either side, and the width of the main avenues, sort of full width, going all the main access route going through the site down to the canal. We have a private drive off that side, and then it continues right through the development to the end, turning head there, down back to the canal with turning head in the private drives, and then through to the end with a turning head, and then drives north and south. So, it's a pretty comprehensive adoption scheme, really.
Thank you very much. I happen to be looking at the same drawing in front of me here. So
yeah.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Do you want to take that one down now?
Yeah.
Very good. Can I ask if there are any further questions?
Me,
Christine.
Is 6 there's 129 houses. Is 6 is that, and the affordable, is it 6? Is that right?
In this location, the requirement is 5%. So yes, six was the figure that was agreed with policy officers. Yeah.
Not many. And who owns the road up to Barnsley?
I believe that's adopted highway. Oh, as it.
I always thought it was a private road. But...
Yeah, this is the road that runs off up to the existing farm and cottages.
Chairman, on this one, if I remember the last time that we looked at this, that road is in the possession, as also is Barnsley Farm, and the fields in between that aren't proposed to be building on in the hands of the original developer.
Yeah, it's within the red line.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's within the ownership of the applicant.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Sorry.
Christine.
Yeah.
I've got Jane Mills and Ken Hartley both indicating. So, Jane, is it a fresh question?
No, it covered. I was thinking about the shared road up. That was all, and that one's been answered now. So.
Okay, I'll bring Ken Hartley back in.
Question not only for the developer but also for Neil, if he's there. Do we have an updated comment at all from the Salterford Nearby Drainage Board?
Neil.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of so far, no. Everything that you've got is in front of you. Chairman, whilst you're discussing it, I'll check on our internal system, but I've not checked myself, but staff are asked to do updates for committees, and I'm not aware that there's been anything else submitted, but whilst you're waiting, I will check.
Okay. Can I just ask if there are any further questions for Mike O'Brien? Jane, you want to come back again?
Just regarding that road again, could it be a potential problem with people accessing the barn at the end of that road? I mean, just think of conflict situations where we've had with other developments. I just wondered if, it's something needs to be looked into regarding that.
Okay, no, when we're talking about conflict situations, we're not talking about machine gun emplacements or anything as extensive as that. No.
As far as I'm aware, no.
Mike, are you able to comment on that, please?
You know, it's been designed in a way that traffic can continue on up to the farm, or, you know, and then the necessary turning head has been provided into that little cul-de-sac there to access. It's 5, 6, 7, and 8, isn't it? So no, there's no issue there.
Okay, Neil.
Chairman, I was just going to say we looked at that specifically, if you recall, on the site visits and when the outline was considered. It is lightly trafficked up there, so the amount of vehicles going up in there will be very light. There's only 4 houses on there, and with a turning area, so we don't anticipate there'll be any level of traffic which will lead to a conflict.
Thank you. Christine, is this another question?
Well, I'm just saying that there's obviously the milk tanker and there's the farm machinery.
Yeah. Okay. Right. If we've got no further questions for Mike, I'm going to thank him very much for attending the meeting, and we'll go into discussion now as committee. So thank you, Mike. Sorry, I keep glancing away because my other screen's got a life of its own here. Right, so we'll go on to discussion. Could I first of all remind councillors that the principle of this development was agreed when outline permission was granted, and that was despite concerns about noise from Silent Night, and indeed the extension of the development into the field beyond the brownfield area. I don't think there was any great controversy about using the brownfield site for redevelopment. It seems to be one of the more acceptable development sites in West Craven and in Bonalswick. So the principle has been agreed. We're now looking at the detail, which is in front of us, obviously. We are commenting to Policy and Resources what our views are as a committee, in the same way that any statutory consultee is able to make comment. I'm grateful for Mike O'Brien explaining some of the details of the issue. I remain concerned about the use of the field beyond the former mill site, and I'm going to put up a picture on screen now, he says, if I can. So this is a picture. Have you got that now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this picture was taken early this year, 22nd of February, and it shows the extensive flooding on the field in question. And this is actually part of the air drainage system. This water drains into the North Sea, and the Barnsley Shed site actually marks the watershed between the North Sea and the Irish Sea. And here we have water, extensive water ponding in those headwaters. This water flows through Salterfirth and then into Earby. In Earby, we have a great problem with flooding. The Environment Agency are looking at investment of many millions of pounds in order to create upstream storage for water. We have a field here that is used for water, and it appears that this application would see that developed, and then there'd be nowhere for the water on that land, and it would inevitably flow downstream into Salterforth and then into Earby. So I think that the reservations that myself and others had at the outline application stage remain. At the time, we were advised that the detailed application may have to accommodate the water. There is some attenuation within the scheme that's proposed, but it's nowhere near enough to take account of the amount of water that actually comes in. Now, if I just switch on to another picture, you can see in the foreground of this one, that's the application site up to the canal, and then this wall which separates it from the rest. And you can see how extensive this flooding is, coming right the way through to the edge of the former mill site. And if you'd have gone and looked in the last few days with the amount of water that we've had, you would have found that we had similar ponding. So it's quite a regular occurrence, and it's something of very great concern to me, who in the last few years I've spent an enormous amount of time trying to get the many millions of pounds to try and reduce the risk of flooding in Earby. And here we are with an application that's going to compound the problem rather than make it easier. So I'd like any comments of the area committee to include a paragraph expressing our concern about the impact of flooding, the use of that field for storage of water, and the fact that this scheme that's submitted is not adequate to actually address the level of water that's held there. Now then, I have got Mike Goulthorpe, who's wanting to come in. So can I bring Mike in?
Thank you, Chairman. I obviously would support everything you've said. Clearly, there's major concerns downstream in terms of the possible effect on Earby, but also as well, these houses going into that location. There's no houses there at the moment, irrespective of somewhat the attenuation that's been described. The houses themselves are going to create increase in water. So, yes. I was supporting your view before that there was no major issues with the brownfield site. It would manage, and as we see, the brownfield site is perhaps less affected than the other. But no, we would have major issues, I think, at this stage, and we've still got to, as you quite rightly say, have been trying for a number of years to get the money spent in Earby, and this clearly is not going to help.
Thank you, Mike. I've got Ken Hartley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little concerned at one of the comments that has just been made by the developer, in the sense that, if I understood what he was saying correctly, they have raised the ground floor level of the houses along the canal towpath to A, give a better aspect, and B, improve access direct from the proposed estate to the canal towpath at several points. And that to me indicates that by raising the ground level, particularly in the greenfield section, then we're going to exacerbate the problem and maybe even create a water flow back the other way to the bottom of Longing Lane. It worries me, if you like, that we've altered the levels where, at one time it was now below, the canal level. It's now above the canal level, or will be if we go ahead with the proposed development. I would therefore, strongly support that we do continue to flag up the dangers of flooding and its associated problems, not only locally but down through the entire drainage system through Earby. I support strongly that.
Thank you, Ken. Before I bring Neil Watson in, this is my opportunity to talk about the Bowker Drain. Now, the Bowker Drain was put in prior to the Leeds and Liverpool Canal being constructed, and it was the theft of water from one river catchment to another, and the Bowker Drain still exists. I'm not sure that it exists underneath the canal now, but the Bowker Drain runs underneath the Silent Night property under Longing, and then eventually, after wending its way through the Crownest Industrial Estate, goes over Skipton Road into Rolls Royce and then into Stockbeck. When the Bowker Drain was originally built, it took water from the area that I demonstrated on the pictures that was flooded. And when the canal was built, included underneath the canal were some oak drains which took the water underneath the canal and then connected into the Bowker Drain. Now, I suspect that those have collapsed and they're no longer there. But in terms of the watershed which this development sits upon, it does mean that it's a very knife-edge situation in terms of the water flows, and clearly the fact that the water from here was shipped over the watershed and into the Ribble catchment demonstrates just how precarious that balancing position is. So I think Ken's comments there do have some merit. I've got Neil wanting to come in. So Neil.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'm just going to share one issue with you. Before I go on to that, though, I've looked on the system. I haven't got any comments from the EB Drainage Board, so there's no updates for that at the moment. I'm not saying they won't come in. But Chairman, and again, I appreciate this is like a consultee comment, so I'm not going to argue one way or the other in favour or not, but just to tell you that the developers have approached this by looking at catchments and where those water flows and the amount of water which will flow onto the various parts of the site, and have in their design designed the drainage to accommodate those flows. Now, whether we want to relook at those or not, that's the theory of what they've done, and hopefully you can see the catchment areas where that they've split the calculations into, and the design of the drainage is supposed to cater for the amount of water which will drain onto the site via those catchment areas. I'm not an expert in drainage, and a lot of it's very technical, and I'm not an expert in that, but that's the principle of what they've done, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Watts, and I'm going to ask you a question. I'm not an expert in drainage either, but I'm somebody that's been studying my knees and sometimes even further up my legs in floodwater over the last 30 years, and I have a passing knowledge of the astonishing way in which water can accumulate in what you think is an innocent field. In terms of the catchments that you just put up on the plan there, the drainage areas, where is it intended that water should go?
Chairman, they've put three options. They haven't actually, because that will be a discharge of condition issue. They haven't fully agreed where that will go, but what they have put in place is and there's a plan which I can try and get up if you wish to, is the capacities that will be needed within the drainage systems to cope with that water in accordance with the standard methodology now, which is the 1 in 100 year plus the 40% climate change. It is a pumped system, so there's pumping involved. There's a pumping station within that to come up with again the standard methodology for the greenfield runoff rate. So the actual final area where because it can be through into streams, into the canal, or into an existing drain that has not yet been fully dealt with. But the general design, the capacities needed for those outflows have been submitted to us.
Thanks, Neil. In terms of discharge into the canal, I mean, we've had several instances within my memory where it's been nip and tuck whether the capacity of the canal is actually overrun. And in terms of the canal, when it fills up beyond its design level, the water flows out through emergency sluices. The closest sluice to this development is at Salterfirth. Therefore, any water discharged into the canal would itself discharge from the canal into the watercourse at Salterfirth and thence go through Salterfirth and into Earby, contributing to flooding in those two communities. So I don't see how any discharge into the canal would be adequate in terms of dealing with water from this side, because the water will end up back in the same watercourse that it would have been in had the development not taken place. The difference being that there would no longer be any place for the water to stand, and so therefore the flow of water would be much higher than is currently the case. An alternative is to go over the watershed and discharge the water into Crow Nest Syke. Now, Crow Nest Syke, I can dig some more pictures out and show you the flooding at Crow Nest Syke if you like, but that's a watercourse that we have spent enormous amounts of time trying to mitigate the risk of flooding to the properties in that area, which again on the cusp of the watershed, and that's the watercourse. And the watercourse is culverted. At its end, down Crowness Road, it goes into what I think, from memory, is a 9-inch culvert, which is utterly inadequate, and which has caused considerable property flooding in very recent years, and I'm talking within the last couple of years. So big do's and little do's, the water from this site is a very great problem. And if we're going to all of a sudden prevent hundreds of cubic meters of water accumulating on that land, then we are going to cause big problems. So I just reiterate my first comment that what we ought to be flagging up to Policy and Resources Committee is this issue with the standing water and how that is dealt with, or rather, I would prefer, is how that is left to continue to stand and not cause the problems that we can all see. I've got Ken Hartley coming back. Ken?
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I have three real main areas of concern that I'd like to flag up in terms of comments. Firstly, is a clarification of the situation vis-a-vis a question that Christine raised. 5 affordable homes on 129 estate is in fact 4.6%, which is less than the policy of 5%. Okay, we're only talking the odd house here, but nevertheless, just to keep the record straight, the plan doesn't meet the 5% policy. It falls short of it. Secondly, I'd like to thank Neil for having his quick look, but we'll be very, very interested indeed to see an update or comment from the Drainage Board on the effects of the flooding, recognising what we've already said. And thirdly, I have some serious concerns about the design of the estate itself. One is that it's a very densely packed piece of land with new build, and I'm not at all happy, if you like, that any kind of provision of green space has been pushed out to the outer boundaries of the estate rather than incorporated into the middle of it, which to me negates the value of providing that green space anyway. What's 10 extra feet to get from the estate into open country, or 3 feet to get from densely populated into what nominally would be the provision of green space within the estate itself. So we're pushing the kiddies and the people who are going to live here out into the open countryside, not providing them with any kind of green breathing space within the boundary of the estate itself, other than right on the boundary. It's just a point of principle that I'd rather have liked to have seen some kind of village green effect rather than pushing the green space provision right out to the boundary of the estate. The site of the estate itself, and here I stress I'm not being critical of any particular developer. Experience has shown us over the last few years that we do need strong building controls built in to any application which is approved. We've seen time and time again the interference with the larger estates, not only the one just on the other side of Silent Night, but the ones in Salterford and the other ones within the West Craven area, of severe interruption and inconvenience caused to the local residents during the construction phases, with lack of attention to things like wheel washing or out of hours operation, deliveries taking place in the wee small hours of the morning and late at night. And therefore, I just want to flag up that whatever we decide on this as a comment, I'd like to see some kind of reference to the fact that the strongest possible building control regulations ought to be applied during the construction phase and monitored closely. It seems to me that, and again, I stress I'm not singling out any particular developer. It seems to be a common thing this day and age that building regulations or conditions that we put on are just fundamentally ignored. And here we're talking a very critical area of Barnolds. We've got a major employer and a lot of fairly dense housing just around this proposed new estate, and even small amounts of inconvenience and mucky roads and early hour deliveries or whatever it is, or late night deliveries, is going to cause a lot of inconvenience to an awful lot of people. And, you know, I'd like to see some very strong words put in to or through policy and resources to building control during the construction phases if it gets approved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ken. I think in terms of terminology, you've referred to building control several times in there. I'm not sure that it's building control, but in terms of the construction phase of work and minimising impact on other residents or existing residents in the area, it'd be more a case of conditions put on and adherence to conditions put on the planning. But apart from that, I support the comments that you've made. I've got two further councillors wanting to contribute. I've got Mike Goldthorpe and then Jane Mills. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Two questions really for Neil Watson. Why, I mean, we've talked about 5% affordable housing. I must say 6 houses does seem a very, very small amount for 129 house development. Is this because the site is partially brownfield? Is that the norm? In terms, that's question one. Question two, we mentioned a pumping station to give this more quickly to EAB. And who maintains the pumping station during its existence? And obviously, the regular maintenance of that pumping station will be required. EAB
Mike, you're breaking up. You may need to disable your video in order for your voice to come through in its usual dulcet tones.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. It's probably
no, you're breaking up again, I'm afraid.
Oh.
Mike, you're breaking up. Just knock yourself off your camera. Take yourself off video and your broadband should be okay. Yeah, try now. Speak.
For Neil Watson. Two questions for Neil Watson. One, why is it that we're only talking about 6 affordable houses against 129? It seems very, very low. I know Jane's already mentioned this. Is it because of the part of this site is brownfield, or is that the norm? The second question is, we're talking about pumping water off the site, get the water more quickly to EAB, no doubt. But who maintains that pumping station on a regular basis, and who takes ownership of it? Those are the two questions for Neil Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may. The short answer to the affordable percentage is that we went through the examination in public on our local plan, our core strategy, part 1 local plan, and that the percentage were agreed based on viability work that was undertaken. So the 5%, it's 5% in the West Craven area. It's 0% in Nelson, and it's 20% in rural areas, simply because of how viability works. We've done some more work for the revision of those policies as a Part 2 plan, and the percentages are likely to go up. But the simple answer is it was based on general viability at the time. Chairman, in terms of pumping station, it's a rising main, so it gets pumped to the pumping station, then it's gravity fed thereafter. But obviously it brings water up from the lower sides of up to the pumping station. Then, as I understand, it's gravity fed. The proposal is that will be the utility company under what's called a Section 104 agreement. They would adopt the whole kit and caboodle.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Jane.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got one or two extra points really, just to mention. I've seen noted regarding a build out near the site entrance to try and basically calm the traffic down that's going on that stretch of road. Really, what I'm getting at is that there's going to be youngsters, I assume, in this housing development wanting to cross the road to the other side to where the mugger is. I just wonder, I would prefer something like a crossing, you know, which would potentially be much safer than just having a build out, which could possibly have cyclists and whatnot going further into the road, and that's proved to be quite dangerous. So that's one point. The next one is sort of picking up on what Ken mentioned about the green areas and whatnot, and with the site being quite dense with houses. I would have liked to have seen more trees planted, especially, you know, with the flooding situation there, to absorb some of that water, and to improve the effects of the impact on wildlife. People have seen reports of bats and hedgehogs, I think, actually was mentioned. So I would like to have seen more around that, and especially along the canal side as well. I would like to have seen more sort of greenery around there to give it more of a corridor down that way. And the other thing is the Canal and Rivers Trust have flagged up concerns regarding possible problems to the culvert under the canal and integrity of the canal bank, etc. You know, and there's probably things that they can do to condition that, but it's just something that I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Have you got any comments on that, Neil?
Chairman, yes, thank you. Chairman, we haven't really looked at the access arrangements with the reserve matters because the outline permission incorporated that design then, so that was agreed by committee by the council at that stage. So we really haven't looked at the access arrangements out onto the main road because they were agreed at they were approved at the outline stage. Chairman, in terms of trees to be planted, I think the green space and the comments made around those, the developers listening, we'll have a discussion around those with the developer. Chairman, it's always difficult because when you've got an outline, you have some things approved at outline, you've got a reserve matters which looks at certain things, you've also got conditions, and the conditions, for example, as Councillor Hartley was referring to about construction code of practice, that's condition 11. We had other conditions about the culvert which haven't yet fully been satisfied. So, Chairman, there will be further information under a separate process that we would have to get and be satisfied with before, as a council, not just as officers, before the development can go forward. But certainly in terms of trees and the open space, that's something that we'll discuss with the developer when this committee has made its comments to PNR.
Thank you. Can we bring our comments together in terms of the commentary that we're going to send through to Policy and Resources? So if we've forgotten anything from this list, you can shout, but don't shout at the end. So can we start off with the concerns about the impact on flooding and the drainage arrangements and the fact that we're losing the storage on that greenfield beyond the brownfield site area? Then if we talk about the level of affordable houses and the fact that it doesn't meet the 5%, the question mark about the design and the desire for this committee to see green space included at the heart of the development rather than on its periphery. A request for conditions to control hours of operation and reduction of nuisance during the construction phase. Despite what Mr. Watson said, I think the request for a crossing is one that this committee should make. Whether or not it's possible or not is another matter. And in terms of a landscaping scheme, that we'd like to see extensive tree planting in order to benefit wildlife. Have I captured all the points that people raised during the discussion?
Yeah.
Is there anything that I've missed? If not, and I'm going to take the vote by acclamation, as it were, could I see committee agreeing to this? If anybody disagrees, they need to indicate and speak up in the next 10 seconds or so. So is everybody agreeable to that resolution going forward to P&R? Yeah, I can see people nodding assent.
Yes.
Is there anybody that would like to indicate any dissent from that resolution? If not, that is carried unanimously. And Mike, who is still with us, I think you've got the message from the committee. Clearly, this is going to go to Pollins Resources, and Joanne's going to tell me when that is. You'll have to switch on.
It's 23rd of July.
23rd of July, so it'll be going to committee on the 23rd of July. Okay, thank you very much on that one. We're now going to go back to the beginning of the agenda, or almost to the beginning of the agenda, and we'll take things in order that they're there. We've already dealt with declarations of interest. Item 2 is public question time. Now, we don't have anybody that's indicated, and so there's nobody within the meeting for public question time. If we continue to have virtual meetings, I think that's something that we need to just have a look at and see whether people can submit questions prior to the meeting that we can then deal with as part of the meeting. Item 3 is the minutes of the meeting.
Sorry, Chair.
Ken
Harley has raised his hand.
Ken, you've indicated.
Acceptance, Chairman.
You're moving the minutes. Thank you.
I am.
And are those seconded, please? Thank you. I can see 2 people indicating. Jane, do you want to speak?
Yes, I'll second that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody that disagrees with the minutes? And just bear in mind, I can't see everybody on screen, so you'd need to shout up if. Okay, I think I'll take those as being a correct record and sign them virtually. There we go. All the seats signed up, and yeah. Item 4 is the police and community safety issues. Now, we do have the figures that were emailed through the other day. We don't have a representative of the Lancashire Constabulary with us this afternoon. I will, however, report that I had a conversation with Chief Superintendent Sam Mackenzie and subsequently with Chief Inspector Andy Cartwright and Inspector Scott Boast about the provision of PCSOs in West Craven. Now, somebody's got the mic on, and we've got some annoying feedback. So I'm going to turn one or two people off. Marjorie, if I switch you off, can you get back on again?
I think so.
Right. I'm gonna mute your microphone.
There's no noise.
You're gone. You're muted now. Right. No more feedback. Yeah. So I've had a conversation with the constabulary. I complained about the fact that we hadn't had 2 PCSOs in West Craven for a long period of time. We were just down to the one local policing officer, Stephen Murphy, and PCSO Neil Wallin. I have now been assured that a second PCSO will be in place from the end of August, and on the basis of patting people on the back when they do a good job, I think the committee should note that there is that appointment in process, and that we should thank them very much for filling that vacant position. Just leave silent the fact that it's been empty for far too long. So if we can start off with that, I'll go on to the figures, which, as I say, were emailed around the other day. I've got Ken indicating that he wants to come in, so I'll bring Ken in momentarily. Ken?
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much indeed. It's really a comment and some additional information, probably because people haven't worked it out, associated with the figures that we've given. We've got 4 months worth of data here, and I'm particularly worried about antisocial behaviour. If I look at the year-on-year increase for the March set of figures, that's 163% increase. For April, that's 215% increase. For May, it's 277% increase year on year. And the new figures that we've now got for June shows it back down to an 83% increase. But I'm seriously worried about the rise of antisocial behaviour. 3 months consecutive rising numbers or rising year-on-year percentages is worrying. And even though the police aren't here, can we request some kind of story from them? You know, what's the cause of these vast increases, almost 300% year-on-year?
I've just put the June figures up on the screen. I'd have to go into my emails to get the other ones out. But I think if Joanne makes a note of that question that you've asked, I'll take that.
Yeah. Again, the numbers are for March, the year-on-year increase is 163% from 22 in 2019 to 58 in 2020. For April, it's a 215% year-on-year from 34 to 108. And in May, it's a 277% increase from 26 to 98. And then we drop back down again for the June figures, which you've just had up on screen. It's just that I'd like to see some kind of story from our local police force about what they think caused it and what they've done about it.
Yeah.
And if in fact they drop back to 83% year on year in June as a result of something that they have done.
Thank you, Ken. I'm sure Joanne's got a note of that set of questions, and we'll pursue that. Now then, I've got 1 or 2 people indicating. I've got Mike Gulthorpe and Jane Mills who've indicated through the raising their hands, and then I've got Jennifer and Christine who are waving at me. So I'll take Mike, Jane, Jennifer and Christine, and we're talking about the the figures provided by the police, as opposed to any other issues at the moment. We'll come on to any other issues in due course. So, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike,
myself away. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Probably I did the same as Ken this morning. I had a bit of spare time, so I about with these figures. He's absolutely right. And you can look at all 3 wards in West Craven, and during with the exception of June, the Richter scale, it is very alarming that we've got this major increase in antisocial behaviour, and indeed. Perhaps it's not surprisingly that this has taken place. If that's the case, if we're going to blame lockdown or whatever. But yes, it is figures which we've seen antisocial figures before, but not consistently so high, month in, month out, against previous years. And June just dips off back to, as Ken says, normal. Probably normal activity. So yeah, it is very worrying indeed, and it's right across West Craven. Craven Ward, Coates Ward, and Earby Ward are all in there, and the percentage. In fact, I had to double check the percentage increases because I didn't actually believe them. I thought I got the arithmetic the wrong way around, to be honest. I thought I got my decimal place in the wrong place. So yes, Chairman. I mean, we do need to understand those figures, as Ken rightly says. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Jane?
Yeah, I know I've been looking at those antisocial figures, and it's incredibly high. It's not only that though, we've had quite a lot of criminal damage, burglaries and one thing and another, so it's not just the antisocial behaviour, it's the escalation of other things as well. A main concern of mine is regarding the potential drug dealing in parks, whether it be whatever drugs and
we're just discussing the figures at the moment.
Right. Okay. But I'll get onto that later then.
Okay.
Okay.
Jennifer?
Yes, I totally agree with everything everybody's saying about this increase. West Craven never ever had such increase like this in all the time I've been a councillor, and I do believe that we need to have some clarification back from the police to see what is going on and where they can sort this mess out. Thank you, David.
You. Christine?
Yeah, I just think, and I don't know, that it might be linked to the coronavirus. I think that the things that they're getting, what are considered antisocial now, the last few months when we were sort of more in lockdown, I think that. I also think looking at social media, people have been reporting all sorts of things, like normally they wouldn't be at home and they wouldn't be, like, oh, there's kids in the park, call the police, or there's this. If you look at the wonderful Barlick talk, I think they've been calling the police. Seems to be a heck of a lot more. Maybe that's the answer. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, we'll ask the question and see what answer we get. Is there anything further on the figures that people want to raise? I'm going to go back to Jane, who was referring to activities in the parks.
Yes, it's the reports of people seeing use either on motorbikes or cars, drug dealing, gathering people there. When Ken and I have been down to various places, we've seen the little nitrous oxide, silver, whatever they are, capsules, and that seems to be on the rise. I don't know whether the police can actually tackle that or not. And what you get from that then is also, if they're congregating in these sort of areas, we're having a lot of damage to the green, such as the bowling green, and damage to the pavilion. It just seems to be a bit of an escalation, really. I just wondered if, the police were, able to keep on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think John can make a note of that.
Chair, I think
Jennifer, are you wanting to come in again?
I'll just pick up on Jane about the antisocial behaviour in our parks with drug dealers. Now, I know people have informed the police about these drug dealers that don't live so far from these one of the parks, but they don't seem to be taking it on board so seriously. But I've never ever seen such disruption. Well, they've spoilt the parks. I mean, if you go down in the morning, if you go down dog walk, taking your dogs for a walk, they're frightened because of all these empty canister things that they've got lying around, broken bottles. We've got willful damage now in Valley Gardens. We've got it up in Clough Park and then up in Leftiff Park. I do think the police need to be on top of this because it is getting out of hand. Thank you, David.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Tom Whip wanting to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I think on the capsules, it might be worth asking the police if they need additional powers in the PSPOs that apply to the parks. I know that there's additional powers they have in the town centres for alcohol, and if the town councils who now own the parks, or indeed Pendle Council who own some of the areas still, if they can give additional powers to police through the PSPOs, I think that would be a great advantage to hopefully prevent misuse of substances.
Thank you. I think the question about the PSPOs is a current one because Pendle Council is currently consulting on the retention of existing PSPOs, which cover former alcohol control zones, and that's something that we need to have a dialogue with the constabulary about. I noticed the other day that one London borough had actually taken out an injunction to prevent the sale or consumption of nitrous oxide. Now, I'm not sure that Mr. Moosdale will be welcoming us with open arms if we suggest taking out an injunction, but I do wonder what effect any such injunction would have without the capability of actually enforcing any measure. And the same applies to PSPOs. If there's nobody there to actually get a grip on activities, then it's not going to be something that does much good. I had a very interesting suggestion from a West Craven resident, which I thought had some merit, but we'd need to look at it. And that was whether the council could create a series of aire de repos, small areas where motorhomes could park up in parks, and just for a night, and then there would be a natural inhibitor of antisocial activity by other people. It's something I think they do in limited way in Craven district, so that's something I'd like to look at, but it's not really mainstream community safety issues as such. Can I ask if there are any further community safety issues that people want to raise? Jane?
Just again, Chairman, on what you were saying, I think Skipton, I'm not 100%, but do they have motorhomes on car parks?
Yes. And I think for a fee, you get access to the toilets and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's something that's only been suggested in the last couple of days, and I'm not sure whether it's a good idea, whether it's something that we could pursue or not. But in the context of problems in parks, it did appear to be something that might be on the way to a solution, or at least minimising the problems.
Yeah.
Ken?
Thank you very much indeed. Boy races. It strikes me that for some strange reason, maybe it isn't strange, there is considerable success in getting these people off the road in Nelson. And it doesn't seem to apply to the rest of Pendle for some reason or other. It's an observation, really. Is there any local activity at all in attempting to get some of our rather unpublic spirited young drivers off the roads in West Craven? And
Okay.
It's, you know, the news reports that I see all seem to be concentrated on cars being seized and crushed in Nelson, and the rest of Pendle seems to be forgotten.
Okay, I'm not sure about the extent to which action's been taken across Pendle. I do know that there has been some concentrated activity centred on Nelson because there has been a very serious issue with that. Just as by the by, did anybody see the footage of the supercar losing control on New Scotland Road, going down a side street, bashing into the bottom of some scaffolding, and then driving off as the scaffolding crashed down behind them? I'm not sure that's the sort of crushing that you were referring to, but it certainly looked very interesting. I won't say exciting. Can I finish on this with a final plea? If you follow my posts on Facebook, you'll have seen that I've tried to encourage people to join a new Lancashire talking facility that the constabulary has set up. And I'm not saying that this is the bee's knees, but it's certainly very worthwhile signing up to that. You, through taking a short survey, can highlight the handful of main issues that concern you, and then subsequently, when you confirm your participation in the I don't know what you call it, the process, you can highlight different locations where this is a problem. So when I did it, I highlighted Victory Park as an issue with antisocial behaviour. If we get hundreds, if people in West Craven join in that and actually log in where all these problems are, we can underline with the police just how much of a problem we've got, and we should be able to pinpoint those areas as well. Jane, you're either indicating or you've left your hand up.
No, it's
I was wrapping up there.
Yeah, all right. Sorry, just on that one, David. I did get an email back saying that the ones that you pick up, you have to put further information for. So if you put like virtually everyone down, you agree with me. So I got as far as the first bit, but declined on the second bit, I'm afraid.
Oh, well, if it don't decline on the second bit, because if you decline on the second bit, you're not part of the process.
Right. Okay.
You do need to confirm, and the thing that frustrated me was that you could only highlight one location for the issues that you'd highlighted. So I started off with Victory Park for antisocial behaviour, and I was going to put several other on, but I couldn't because the system won't let me. I have raised that with the police. Whether it'll change it or not is another matter, but I would encourage people to do it and do the confirmation as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I move on down the agenda now? Nobody else wanting to speak on that. So what we're doing is we're asking Joanne to communicate with the constabulary on the issues that we've raised during that discussion, and there'll be note in the figures that we've seen and the rest of the comments that we've made. And we're going to go back onto planning applications now. And the only other planning application that we've got is one that we deferred from the last meeting because we weren't happy about the electric cables going off across the site. Neil is going to read a short statement from the applicant's agent. I did ask for this to be emailed through to everybody, so you should have seen it, but for purposes of fulfilling what we said we would do, I would ask if Neil would read it out, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a statement prepared by Alan Kinder on behalf of the applicant Cross Construction Limited in support of the application. This scheme already benefits from outline planning permission under reference 160630, and therefore the principle of this development has already been firmly established, and as a consequence it is purely the matters of detail which come before before you today for consideration. The application was deferred at the last meeting at the request of members to explore the possibility of the undergrounding of the overhead power lines which traverse the site directly above the route of the planned estate road. My clients have researched the issue with the Electricity North West Limited, and I am pleased to report that notwithstanding that not inconsiderable associated costs, then this is a matter which my client is prepared to incorporate into the scheme. The officer report is extremely comprehensive and fully appraises the submitted scheme against both national policy and also policies contained within the core strategy, and quite rightly concludes that it is in full accord. In more detail terms, the scheme seeks to deliver a number of affordable bungalows which will be delivered as the first phase of the development in a partnership arrangement with Moscow St Vincent's Housing Association, who are active elsewhere within the borough. This element of the scheme will deliver a total of 6 affordable 2-bedroom bungalows, principally aimed at the elderly for rent, and Moscow St Vincent's have already secured the necessary funding for this element of the project via Homes England. As such, it is intended that work on site will be scheduled to commence as soon as possible in order to ensure this important first phase of development, incorporating the 6 affordable rented bungalows, is delivered before spring of next year. In conclusion, on behalf of our joint clients, Cross Construction Limited and Moscow St Vincent's Housing Association, then we trust that members will feel able to fully endorse the officer recommendation of approval with the additional condition in respect of the undergrounding of the overhead power lines to enable the delivery of this scheme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Neil. So yeah, this is one that has, despite our reservations and objections previously, it has got planning approval, and as Neil has just outlined, the applicants have agreed to the request that the committee made at the last meeting. Before I bring Mike in, I've got Ken who's indicating. Ken?
Thank you, Chair. It's just basically, can I record my thanks to our own planning department, Neil, and to the agent and the developer for accommodating the request to bury those power lines and negate what could be a fairly serious problem as far as I could see it. I just want to record my thanks for them making that accommodation.
Thank you,
I'll
Ken.
pass it over to Mike.
Right, I'll bring Mike in.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll just get rid of my picture again. Yes, I think I would concur 100% with what Ken has just said. I think we've run its course with this, irrespective of our unanimous views in the past. I think at the end of the day, we have got to the point where, in terms of this situation, we must support the officer's recommendations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are you moving then that it be approved?
I would move it. We should be approved.
Okay. Can I bring Councillor Carter in.
Yeah, I'll second that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. We just about caught that at the end. Yeah. Okay, so it's moved and seconded that this is approved subject to the conditions set out in the report. I've got Councillor Tom Whip indicating.
Thanks, Chair. I'd also like to pass on my thanks for the accommodation the developer has made. That was the only issue with the layout of the application that I had. And just to reiterate what Ken said, thank you to the developer, the agent and the planning team for making that happen.
Okay. Before I put this to the vote, obviously I very much regret that this development was given outline approval in the past. I'm not going to vote for it now, but I'm going to ask people if there is anybody who wants to vote against, and then I will ask for those who are content with approving this. I won't do the roll call, apart from the fact that I've lost the roll call, so I don't know what order to do it in. So I'm going to, I'm not going to vote for it, but I'm going to just sit on my hand. Is there anybody wanting to vote against, please? If you can indicate now, who want to speak, wave at me, raise your hand virtually. I have no indication from anybody that they want to vote against. So can those in favour please signify by either raising the hand on screen like that. Those in favour please show. I've got Colin, Mike, Ken, Jennifer. Thank you very much. Yeah, Tom. So that proposal put forward by Mike and seconded by Colin is approved. The development has got reserved matters, not deserved matters, reserved matters approval, and Mr. Watson will advise the applicants in due course. Thank you very much. Can we move on now? Item 6 is enforcement action. Would somebody, there's just 2 items there, Gospel Hall and the Victor Business Park. Would somebody move that we note those? Ken?
Certainly, Chair. Thank you very much. I move that we note them. I would like to ask a question about Gospel Hall. It says in the report, the matter is now to be taken back to court as the notice has not been complied with. And my question is when? It's been dragging on. Is there any information about when that might go back to court?
Neil?
Chairman, if I may. I did have a note from Mr. Colshaw, Head of Legal Services, about another matter. I think we've got about 38 or 39 outstanding actions in court. So we don't know when the courts are going to start opening for business. So it is one of those, but I'm afraid I can't give you a date.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
Okay, I think we'll note that then. Any further questions or comments on that? No, we'll move on. Item 7 is financial matters and the capital programme. And there are 2 issues for us to decide. I'm just going to mute somebody because we've got a lot of echo again. Right, those people whose mics were open, I have muted you. Okay. In terms of the issues for the decision on the capital programme, there's an application for St Peter's Community Garden, which it says St Peter's Community Garden, Bonoldswick, and it's an application by Mrs Janet Whip. Can I just point out that unless I go back about 6 generations, Mrs Janet Whip isn't related, and I assume that St Peter's Community Garden is in Earby. So I'm looking at Mike and Colin as to whether you'd like to approve this. So £200.
I'm just going to. Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, I would. I would approve the £200 in respect of the St Peter's Community Garden project. Okay,
that's seconded, Colin. Yeah, seconded. I think we'll take it that everybody is agreeable to that. I'm going to move on to the second bid that we have here, which is actually, I'll take it in 2 separate parts. And the request is from the Planning, Economic Development and Regulatory Services section, which Mr Watson heads up, and it's for premises improvement grants for both Bonoldswick and Earby. Now, traditionally, we've had premises improvement grants available for town centre properties for several years. Last year in Bonoldswick, because we wanted to fund the work on the town square, which is due to start shortly, all the available funding was put into that, so it was affordable, and we didn't have any funding for premises improvement grants. But the request is to resume that programme. I do know of one one business owner that would like to avail themselves of the opportunity. So my suggestion would be that insofar as Bonoldswick is concerned, we do approve this £3,000 and review the amount of funding that we've earmarked for this in the event that we get lots of interest in it. Can I see whether that meets with committee's approval, please? I can see Jane Mills putting her thumb up, and Jennifer is waving at me. So, and I've got Ken indicating as well. So I'll bring Jennifer and then Ken. Jennifer? You'll need to unmute, Jennifer. Jennifer?
Whilst you're sorting Jennifer out, I'd just second that, David. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer, we're struggling.
There we are.
You're on now.
I'm unmuted now.
You're unmuted, but you're in a very startled.
I'm breaking up.
You are indeed. You just need to turn your picture off if you're breaking up, and then the sound comes through okay.
Yeah. All I'm saying is I totally agree with everybody, and I'll vote for it as well.
Okay. Well, I think most people have signified. Tom was signifying assent as well. So I think we're agreed on that. The second part of this request is to top up the fund for Earby, where there hasn't been a tremendous amount of expenditure in recent years, but there is some funding that has been allocated, and this is to bring it up to a reasonable level in the event of further applications. So I'm looking for Mike and Colin.
Chairman,
what's your view?
Chairman, thank you. I'd support the extra money going in there to bring it up. I think it's £1,285, and also I would support the view that if any more money is needed during the year and we've still got money left, then we would obviously top up still further.
Yeah, thank you. Colin, you support that? Yeah, very good. Right, I think we can take it that there's unanimous agreement on both aspects of that proposal. I think as far as the rest of the decisions are concerned, it's just a case of noting it. So unless there's anything further that people want to raise, I'm going to move on. Okay, moving on then. The next item, which links back to what we've just been talking about really, is the reopening of Bonalswick and Earby town centres. And you recall at the last meeting, we agreed to set up task groups, which would consider actions that we could take to help get the town centres back on their feet following lockdown. Now, I mean, that's not been successful in the sense of having an organised task group for Bonalswick and an organised task group for Earby. In Bonalswick's case, there's been quite a lot of online discussion, and that's involved town councillors as well as ourselves. In Earby's case, Joanne did contact the clerk to Earby Town Council, but last time I was talking to Joanne about it, we didn't have a response as such, so struggling a bit with that. In both Earby and Bonalswick's case, I've been working with the communications team at Pendle in terms of the activities that are funded from the centre. There's quite a lot of signage have been put up, you know, asking people to adhere to the physical distancing requirements, and a hard copy leaflet has been produced for both communities saying Bonalswick open for business, Earby open for business, and the social media interest in those has been very strong. So we got off to a good start. Excuse me. In terms of proposals going forward, I've got a set of things that we'd like to suggest as a basis for Bonalswick going forward, and I'm going to post those on the conversation, and then I'll run through them in due course. The first suggested activity is a video or videos promoting the town centre and the fact that it's reopened, and those videos to be used on social media, posted on YouTube, used perhaps on Visit Bonalswick, so that we can promote the town and get people involved with it. Possibly a production of a booklet with a theme of "We're Here for You" or something like that, featuring town centre businesses for distribution locally. So that would be in Bonalswick or in the general area. And in connection with that, commissioning a photographer to get pictures of traders so that they could be featured in the booklet, but also on social media, websites and the like, and the images are given to the traders for their own use as far as we're concerned. Now, I've checked with Hassan Ditta, and he thinks those activities would be eligible for funding. Going on, a suggestion that we could have a marquee cover erected on the town square when the work is completed for the surfacing, and that could run from October through till Christmas perhaps, and to be used for an enhanced programme of events or activities with more smaller and more regular events, as well as the big showpiece ones. And then as a matter of course, it could be used for tables for the cafes and the like for them to make use of during the week as perhaps as a relaunched market. Possibly a new loyalty scheme, which there's various models that we could have a look at. Question mark PPE for traders. There is a question about whether that is eligible and whether we could fund it from the capital programme of the West Craven Area Committee. And Jane, Councillor Mills, suggested cashless facilities for traders as well. And there might be a question mark about whether that's eligible. But that's the sort of programme that we're looking at in Barlick. A lot of this would fit in for AB as well. And it might be that some of the work could be jointly commissioned. So, for instance, if we did a booklet, it could feature both Bonalswick and AB. But I'm just throwing these things out there as a basis for discussion. So that brings me to the end of quite a lengthy discourse there. I'm sure Joanne can see that in the comments. And I've got Mike Goulthorpe, who's indicating that he wants to come in. So, Mike, can I bring you in, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Two or three, well, positively, we would more than welcome being involved in any generic leafleting or things like that, where you could actually combine the area. Clearly, we've only got a relatively small high street compared to Bonalswick, but nevertheless, the majority of the trading all the way through, because most of them are fresh food. The ones that are opening now are in the beauty area, if you want, the hairdressers and those sort of places, and one or two insurance brokerages, and of course our charity shop. The cafes are there as well to come online, but I think 8 retail businesses have opened all the way through. Very, very disappointed indeed that we've not been able to get a positive response from AB Town Council, and it's not through want of trying. I can support that. Certainly, Colin's been involved in trying to encourage them to take a vital part of this, but unfortunately we have failed. However, suffice to say that the ward councillors are in and about the high street and will continue to be liaising with businesses and trying to help and give guidance wherever we can. Most of the businesses are certainly operating within keeping it safe and government guidelines. The ones that have certainly been open from the beginning are. Publicity, I think, is the key for AB. So yes, I think we would welcome pooling our resources there in anything that can be published to get that information out. I don't know if Colin's got any more to add to that, but yes, we would more than welcome cooperation on this one. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Colin, do you want to come in?
I agree with everything Mike was saying. I've been up and down the high street myself, talking to people and encouraging them. And I'll agree with everything you say, that we need to join together, get things moving. As Mike was saying, a lot of our shops are prepared to go the extra mile, and we look forward to opening up to business.
Yeah. Thank you. Ken, I've got you indicating.
Thank you, Chair. I support everything I think that we've said so far, and strongly encourage cooperation, across West Craven, not forgetting the odd business, if you like, that might be located in Suff or the villages. One thing strikes me about this whole thing is that, like Mike says, in AB some 8 businesses have stuck it out throughout the whole of the pandemic so far, and I think that they're real heroes. That we could perhaps make something just a wee bit special of those that have been there all the time, welcoming people. It strikes me that we have a very similar situation now to the situation that existed in 1945 with VJ Day, where the coronavirus has enforced rationing. We've got the spivs who've been profiteering from coronavirus. We've got a very similar situation where families have suffered through no fault of their own. Businesses have suffered and had to be diverted onto other things other than their mainline business. There are lots of parallels between the situation in 45, and maybe we could couple it with a VJ Day type scenario that welcomes some form of return to a new normal as a theme. Just ideas.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful. I've got Jennifer indicating. You have to unmute, Jennifer.
There we go. I'm right now. I'd just like to say, on behalf of all us councillors at West Craven Area Committee, we'd like to say to the people of Barnoldswick, we've survived through it. And like Ken said, we need a good big celebration to say Barnoldswick is alive and kicking. Because I must say to the residents of Barnoldswick, you've been absolutely terrific in keeping your distances, the shopkeepers keeping open and everybody, and even the councillors have been there out on the streets and getting the problem solved. But I would totally agree with whatever you've said, David, in bringing Barnoldswick back onto the map. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I concur with both what Ken and Jennifer say. I think really by what's been going on with the reopening the pubs and everything, that I think people would love to have a big safe gathering if that's possible. I don't know. Just to really, you know, to make the town as one, or West Craven as one, if we all, you know, do it in a big area, you know, whether it's the villages combined, you know, the whole area of West Craven. I think people, you know, whether it's a Jacob's Join or under the marquee or something like that we've had before, I don't know, but it's something to think about, I think, anyway.
Thank you very much. We'll probably have to postpone any great celebrations till the time that we can actually meet together in a legal and acceptable fashion. I'm not sure the example of reopening the pubs was necessarily one that we'd want to follow. But I take it from those comments that most people are content with the various suggestions that have been made, that we work together across Barnoldswick and Earby in the production of material and include any of the businesses in other parts of West Craven, Suffolk. You know, there is a business in Salterford there that are a couple of businesses that would be appropriate. Yeah, we're all happy with that. Is there anything further to be said on this? If not, I'm going to move on. Okay. The next issue, premises improvement grants, which we've already referred to in the capital programme. We do need to, in addition to the allocation of the funding, I think insofar as Barnoldswick is concerned, we need to have the small panel to scrutinise any grant applications that come in. So if I can leave that to be dealt with outside the meeting, is that okay?
Yeah.
can we move the report? Yeah, we're accepting the report. Thank you. And moving on again.
Apologies, Chair. There's
Sorry.
There's some slippage there to be moved if we're in agreement.
Yeah, I'm moving the report, the recommendations of the report, David. So we're accepting the slippage. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then we're going to go on to item 10. And these are requests for residents only parking. The second one in Salterford has been hanging around for a heck of a long time. And the residents in that area have done a lot of work in identifying and carrying out surveys and getting 100% of the residents on board with the Parkview tourist proposal. The report said that there's 9 signatories, and more recently, when the unoccupied property has been occupied, that resident has signed 2. So that's the oldest one from Salterford. The more recent request is for 3149 Long Ing Lane, and in both cases the committee's asked to consider that the Housing, Health and Engineering Service Manager conducts a survey and the reports the results back. Now, I think in Salterford's case, a lot of that work has been done previously, but nevertheless, we can redo that survey. If we get it back to us at a meeting in the near future, we would then need to ask the County Council to agree to implement these proposals. Up until recently, there hasn't been any funding at the County Council for residents parking. That position has changed, so there is a prospect of perhaps getting these through. So I would very much urge the committee to support the recommendations that we go forward on both of these. Ken, I've got you indicating.
Thank you, Chair.
I've got Kenny as well.
Yeah, I think you've actually answered my question, but I'd like to hear it answered directly. Do we now expect the County Council to support valid applications? And if the answer to that is yes, then I concur with your suggestion that we move forward as per the minutes suggest.
In terms
of the agenda.
Yeah. The County Council have created a small budget for residents parking scheme implementation, and that follows an interregnum of many years, perhaps as many as 8 years, or I don't know, I've forgotten now, quite a long time, and there hasn't been any funding to implement them. And the indications are that some schemes will be implemented if the surveys support their implementation. So there's something riding on the surveys, but it's looking more positive than it has for several years previously, and I would be hopeful that they could be implemented. So that's why I'm suggesting that we move forward. Is that okay, Ken?
Yeah, fine. I'm just wondering how much of that is going to get outside Blackpool, but
well, Blackpool isn't part of the County Council. It could be part of a combined authority if, God forbid, that goes forward. But never mind. Notwithstanding
that, yeah, I'd support moving on this one.
Okay, can I bring Jennifer in?
Yes, I'd like to support what you've said, David, and that we do go ahead and start getting this in place. You know, you've got my full support on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're all in agreement, unless anybody jumps up and down. Not physically, you don't have to do it, but I'm not seeing anybody indicating that they want to speak, so I will take that is approved. Thank you very much. And now going on to the final item on the agenda, which is environmental blight. And we have 2 areas that we've highlighted previously as being owned by Pendle Council and requiring attention. So the first one is the Damhead garage site. I think this is one that needs regular visits, checking and clearance of any materials. The second one is the West Close Road Lorry Park, where both Councillor Tom Whip and myself have direct experience of the fly tipping that has taken place in the past. I think at the moment, with the operation of the centre and the way that it's been staffed, there has perhaps been less of an issue. But again, it needs to be checked regularly. I don't know whether Councillor Tom Whip wants to come in on that one. West Close Road Lorry Park.
I think you've said everything that needs to be said, Chair. There's just a continual issue where people are dumping outside. Containers there. It to be happening so close to the waste recycling centre, it really does grind my gears. But yeah.
There is something that we've discussed when we've been on site, and that's the possibility of strengthening the tree planting along the boundary at the top of the banking at the West Close garage, West Close Lorry Park, and the Bonalswick in Bloom group have said, well, you know, could perhaps plant some willows and then sort of make a willow weaving with a living willow to create a barrier to prevent dumping down the slope there. So perhaps something that we could look at. We okay with that? Is there anything further on this, Jane?
Sorry, I was just putting my hand up to say, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, if there's no further comments on that item, can I thank members very much for attending. I won't wish you a safe journey home, although several members of staff may need to travel home. But I will thank you very much for participating in the meeting. Declare the meeting closed with 3 minutes spare from our allotted time. I realise we didn't have to fill it all, but there you go. Meetings expand to fit the time available. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.